The financial crisis was 30 years in the making, according to award-winning financial reporter and author Charles Gasparino. He traces the roots of the biggest financial disaster since the Great Depression in his new book, The Sellout: How 3 Decades of Wall Street Greed and Government Mismanagement Destroyed the Global Financial System. Hi, Charlie.
Thank you for having me.
That's a pretty big title there. So what were those 3 decades in the making? Give me some highlights for those of us watching who don't want to read the whole book.
Come on, you got to read the whole book.
Or buy the book. They don't have to read it.
One of the things that I tried to do in this book, and what the other books haven't really done, is say, everybody knows what happened in 2007, 2008, and I go into it in great detail in the book. But what caused 2007, 2008? What was the sort of narrative before that? And what I wanted to show is that how this security, the mortgage-backed security, was essentially behind 3 sort of blow-ups in the bond markets, major blow-ups, one in 86, 87, one in 94, one in 1998 that was involved with the long-term capital hedge fund implosion. And each time it blew up, Wall Street took greater and greater risk until they took the ultimate of risk, which was in 2007, 2008, when the system essentially reached Armageddon levels. And why did Wall Street take that risk? And another thing that I think a lot of people haven't brought up, and which is central to my book, is that I show how government essentially enticed the risk takers.
Talk a little bit about the government, because in my previous life as a financial planner, I used to say, forget what the government tells you about how home ownership's the most important thing. Some people shouldn't buy a house.
Boy, you were the few people saying that.
I know, but it didn't get me a lot of business.
That's right. Well, because just the opposite was going on. I mean, there were in terms of the government's intervention, there was two things that they did. Number one is the mortgage-backed securities market is in many ways a symptom of government policy. Its sort of emergence as a major business line for Wall Street was in of itself a government effort. And I go through that in the book, the people behind that in the Clinton administration, namely Henry Cisneros, Andrew Cuomo, and George Bush's HUD secretaries. I don't let them off the hook either, because they all were, it was interesting, they were all essentially saying that home ownership isn't something that should be earned, which is what you were saying, but something that is essentially a right. And we're going to make it easy for you to do that. Making it easy, too easy for people, what they did was they created tremendous risk in the system, but they also, in an odd way, took the home values and took them through the roof, because you had so many people buying homes that shouldn't be buying them.
Right, they inflated the bubble. They were right there.
And the other part of the government intervention was like when Wall Street firms would package these bonds throughout the last 30 years, they would hold them on their books because they would get extra yield out of them. They were very high-yielding securities until they blew up, and they always used to blow up because they're very risky. And what the government did each time they blew up, they would go in there and they would throw money at the problem. They would give Wall Street easy money, and they would try to prop the market back up. And what they did was create what's known as moral hazard. They went in there and they said, listen, there's no consequence to your risk, until last 2 years, where no amount of Fed easing, no amount of throwing money at it was going to essentially save the system unless the government took over the banks.
Well, it's an interesting thing, because I can imagine that we don't expect Congress or any administrative officials to truly understand risk. But in the book, you say that CEOs didn't even understand the risks that they were assuming. Let me ask you something. Were the math heads, the geniuses who created the products, did they know the risks?
They understood risk in a sort of esoteric way, and I talk about this. I mean, they all understood, they all had their measurements, with the government being involved so much, with so much risk in the system, that I don't think their traditional measurements actually worked. And on top of that, you had rating agencies that were rating all these things AAA for no one even knows why. I mean, these were the most bizarre ratings in the world. You throw that in the mix, and it was the odds of blowing up were actually obviously much less than 1 in 100.
And let's throw one more thing onto the pie, because I know this is one of your favorite topics, the SEC. Now, let me read you a quote, because the SEC chair, Mary Shapiro, who came from FINRA after making something like $7 million, I don't know why she would take this job, but
FINRA, the self-regulatory organization of Wall Street. Right?
Exactly. And Mary Shapiro said that investors need to see that we are going after those who engage in wrongdoing. That's what she said.
I'm pretty scared. Right.
And you argue the SEC should be...
Yeah, because I'm not saying there shouldn't be any watchdogs. I just think that agency has proved so inept over the years that I don't think there's any reason for it to exist, that they should start over, or maybe take all their responsibilities, give it to the FBI, where they start looking at white collar crime. The problem with the SEC, and I talk about this in the book at some length, is that it's the people that go there generally don't want to be there. It's like a pit stop for them. They want to go there, you know, learn a little bit about the securities laws, and then move on. It's one of the reasons why I believe Bernie Madoff was able to perpetrate a $50 billion scam and get away with it for 10, 20 years, even though he was examined by the SEC like 24 times in those 10 years. The examiners themselves look at someone like Madoff, a major player, someone they might want to work for. Now, I'm not saying there's any fraud involved here, but I just think that conflict of interest makes them less skeptical, less rigorous in their sort of investigation. There needs to be an adversarial relationship. I think that's why the SEC needs to be blown up. You throw that on top of the fact that the SEC really didn't understand capital. They're making a mortgage bond equal to a treasury bond in terms of if a bank holds this, how much capital they have to put aside just in case it blows up. And that is absurd.
It is. I mean, patently absurd. And
even if it is a AAA.
Exactly, and just asking for trouble, obviously.
And we all know it's not. They were far less than AAAs. There was Ds and Fs, you know.
Please, okay, let's do something fun. A veteran Wall Street reporter, you know everybody.
Yeah.
And you know them personally, so I'm going to name some of the big, bold-faced names on Wall Street, and you're going to give me the one adjective that best describes each one of these guys.
Right.
You ready?
Yeah.
Bear Stearns' Jimmy Kane.
Iconoclast.
Lehman's Dick Fold.
Nasty.
Merrill Lynch's Stan O'Neill.
Nastier.
Wow. J.P. Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon.
Smart.
Goldman Sachs' Lloyd Blankfein.
Kind of a twerp, but smart. Is that an adjective? Kind of a twerp?
Twerpish.
Twerp.
Morgan Stanley's John Mack.
I'm not going to give you an adjective. Man's man. Good guy. Not a pig.
Okay.
But bet wrong.
Okay. Last one for you. Former Bank of America powerhouse Ken Lewis.
Oh, man. Tragic story. I mean, you can't give, it's hard to give adjectives to these people because.
Wait, so King Lear.
You know, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, you know, I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he saw Merrill as a good firm. He was kind of pressured. He would have backed out of that deal if he could have, and he couldn't, and he's taking the fall now.
Charlie, thank you so much.
Thank you
it's
for
been
having
great.
me.
And thanks for watching.